Hey, and welcome back to Daniel's Security Academy. Starting today, I'm actually using my new logo for this channel, and I also changed the slide deck a little bit in terms of format, but not too much. I actually like the old design. Let me know what you think, and yeah, I would be happy for some feedback. Today we are going through the topic of authorization and different access control models, and we will walk through authorization in general again, as we just touched base in the last session, where we also spoke about authentication. And then we go into different access control variants. We have the Discretionary Access Control, DAC, the Mandatory Access Control, MAC, Role-Based Access Control, RBAC, Attribute-Based Access Control, ABAC, ABAC, and Rule-Based Access Control, RUBAC. And at the end, we'll just do a little comparison of the first four. And yeah, pretty much map them on different criterias, where it's used, where it's good to be used, what kind of advantages each has in different fields, and yeah, like that. Okay, but let's start with the authorization recap again. One important thing is don't confuse authorization with authentication. It's different approaches and it's different goals for each of them, because authentication is about who are you, confirming that the user is who they say they are. So on the bottom, it's the left part in the image. And authorization is about, are you allowed to do it? So does the user have the permission to access the resource he requests to? Authorization always comes after authentication. So authorization takes the authentication process as granted. I will not check again, okay, are you really the guy? No, I just tell, okay, you're the guy, but this one is your permission set, and based on this, you may access this or not. And both can be done by the same system, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same system doing both authentication and authorization. And we have many different concepts for authorization, and the access control part of it will be covered here in the session. We'll also talk about the different standards we have for authentication and authorization in combination, like OAuth 2, SAML, Connect ID, and those kind of concepts we'll cover in the next session. Okay, let's start with the Discretionary Access Control, DAC. And here the creator of an object is automatically the owner of an object. And the creator of a file receives the full, or the owner rights based on what kind of operating system you are and how it's called, but it has a full rights on the object. So owner can access the object as much or in a way it wants. But also the creator, which is the owner, can then specify additional users and or groups to access the object. So you can add permissions to someone else as the creator, who is ultimately the owner of the object. Then we have Mandatory Access Control, MAC. And this one is based on a level of clearance you have. So there are multiple clearance levels, and both users and objects are having a certain set or a certain level of clearance, which will determine what kind of objects or how the access can work. Most commonly, you will find the 4 classifications you see on the right-hand side here, which is top secret, secret, confidential, unclassified. And let's make it an example. So someone with a secret clearance, the second highest, can read anything from secret, confidential, and unclassified, but cannot read top secret. So you can read top down, but not bottom up. So you can read anything below your actual clearance, but you cannot read up. And sometimes, apart from the 4 classifications you have, there might be an additional project clearance. So for example, even though you have the secret clearance, it might require you an additional right or clearance to access a specific project or a specific folder, because there's like a project specific clearance on top of the 4 levels. And this one is mainly used in military. Let's move over to the role-based access control, RBAC, which is probably like one of the most common access control systems for applications and services. And the access is steered via roles, like as the name already says. So access to systems are granted based on roles a user have. So user can have multiple roles. So a user can be part of the engineering team, but can also be part of like a sales team or a financial team, depending on his duties. But most often those roles can be very specific. So not necessarily like he's part of the sales department, but he is an accountant, and additionally to the accountant role, he also has the role for a specific project. He has the role because he's also part of I don't know, IT support, whatever, then he received also IT support roles. And by doing this, you need to watch out for the so-called privilege creep. Privilege creep mainly aims for the problem when users are moving within the company from one position to another position. Like, let's say an accountant wants to become a network engineer because he thinks like, okay, my time with the numbers are over. I want to do some network magic. So he moves from accountant to network engineering. And what you need to make sure is to delete the old roles and permissions the user had as an accountant and grant him only the new ones as a network engineer. Because if you are not doing that, let's say the deletion of the old rules and roles, the user will add up permissions and roles within his time in the company, and may have at the end permissions he should not have or should not have anymore. That's what's a privilege creep. And moving forward, like each role has a specific set of permissions on specific systems. Let's say the engineering role has permissions to servers and applications in the engineering space, but only there. And those kind of roles are frequently done and mapped by group memberships in Active Directory, for example. And one common example is that a user, which is part of the group Allow VPN Users, may authenticate via the corporate VPN connection. This is a very, very common use case for using such a role or a group membership to determine what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Moving on to the attribute-based access control, ABAC is like a continuation of the role-based access control, which will give you a little bit more, not a little bit, quite a lot more detailed options to set authorization, because there are 3 attribute groups existing which you can use to build your authorization rules. The first one is based and around the user, where you could use name, role, security clearance, IDs, and such kind of information. Then you also have the resource, like which resource is the user trying to access, what's the creation date, file name, who's the resource owner, what kind of data sensitivity classification do we have for this one, as like secret data, it's confidential data. And thirdly, you have the environment. So environment could be anything, like from where are you trying to access the data, when are you trying to access the data, and what's the current threat level in the environment. So let's make an example. If a user wants to access a resource, something he or she needs doing his daily business, he will be allowed to do so during the regular work time, let's say 9 to 5. But if a user tries to access the exact same resource, let's say in the nighttime, and maybe also from a different location, not from the office, but from, I don't know, an IP address outside of the country, maybe even, he or she will not be able to access it, because the attribute-based access control will deny the authorization of the access. And with this, you can build a lot of rules based on constraints, like where the user is right now, what time is it, who is he, what kind of resource is he or she trying to access. And yeah, it can get pretty complicated here, because yeah, you may already see like the variations are great. Moving on to the last one, which is not necessarily like an access control for authorization in the sense the four before were, because rule-based access control is pretty much a simple if-then statements, and is mostly used in a networking world for firewall rule sets, for example, as the table below shows. And it's pretty much, if someone wants to reach a destination on a specific port, the packet flow may be either allowed or denied. And depending on what kind of firewall you have multiple filters you can apply. For basic firewalls, you may only have like source, destination, port, and for next generation firewalls, you may also filter on the application itself, the payload, and those kind of things. And those rule sets always have, or always should have, an implicit deny rule at the end. So if no statement, no if-then statement matched before, it should always be an, okay, we didn't find anything in the table, it is denied. We don't find anything that's allowed for this one, just deny it. And if we walk through the table below, if a packet comes from any source net and you want to reach to this first IP address and you want to reach it on port 80, first rule would say, okay, source any, this destination, port 80, okay, let's grant it, allow, next packet. And the rule set is always worked through from top to bottom. Therefore, in this example, rule 4 and 5 don't really make any sense, because rule 6 already covers those kind of cases. But yeah, let's not dig too deep into firewall rules, because I will cover this in a separate session for sure, how firewalls work and how those rule sets are built and how you can efficiently build firewall rule sets. Okay, let's move on to the last slide here, which is the comparison slide. And here I try to give you an overview on the different access controls and like the details for each, pretty much. And this is based on a ResearchGate figure, which I found. So this is not made by myself, but I took it from ResearchGate. So the first row is pretty much the access control to information. Like, how is it done? For DAC, it's through owner of data, like who created it is the owner. For MAC, it's based on like the fixed rules. For RBAC, it's based on the roles. And for ABAC, it's based on attributes. And you also see the kind of flexibility in here. How is the access revocation complexity? And this one is pretty much, I think, one of the most interesting rows here, as the access revocation complexity is very complex for discretionary access control, because only the creator is the owner and have full rights. So it's complex to revoke access from the creator of a file. So someone creating a file and you want to revoke his access, it's very complex to do so. However, it is very easy to do so for the other three, MAC, RBAC, and ABAC, because you just need to remove either a clearance level, a role, or some attributes from someone to revoke his or her access. And the same is with the flexibility of access and information, because as you can imagine, MAC is not very flexible, because you only have 4 clearance levels, and those clearance levels determine what kind of access or information can be accessed. But for RBAC and ABAC, it is high or very high, because you can define as many roles and attributes as you want to. Okay, and finally, I also put, or ResearchGate actually put there some examples where it is used. So DAC is used in the initial Unix system. MAC is used in the US Department of Defense or military. RBAC, it was said that it's used in the Atlas experiment in CERN, but actually nowadays it's used within like any enterprises across the globe. Like, all enterprises are based on role-based access control. And the federal government in US are apparently using attribute-based access control. But it's not only the federal government. This access control is picking up for sure. I've seen companies and enterprises picking up the more detailed approach from attribute-based access control over role-based access control. And there are multiple different systems and services out there who will help to create attribute-based access control. Okay, that's it for today's session on authorization. I hope you liked the session. I hope you could pick up something new for you. And I would be really happy if you could share some of your thoughts about the sessions I'm giving you, the videos, my talking, the slides, the content. Like, pretty much, I'm happy for any kind of feedback on the channel. So feel free to leave a comment, and this will for sure help me to grow and to improve the content. Have a good one and stay safe.